My name is Naomi, and I am 58 years old. I spent my entire life building a career and saving every penny so my daughter could have the life I never had. I set aside $700,000 as a gift for her future. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine she would stand in front of hundreds of people and call me the help. That night changed everything between us forever. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever felt invisible to someone you love more than life itself. What happened next will stay with me until my last breath. I grew up in a small house in Newark, New Jersey, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors through the walls and the pipes froze every winter. My father was a plumber who worked 16-hour days just to keep food on our table. My mother worked the night shift as a nurse at the county hospital, coming home just as the sun rose with tired eyes and swollen feet. We never had much, but my parents gave me something money could not buy. They gave me the belief that hard work could change your circumstances. I was the first person in my entire family to attend college. There was no trust fund waiting for me, no connections to open doors. I earned a scholarship through sheer determination, studying until 2 in the morning while working part-time at a grocery store. I graduated with a degree in finance and started at the very bottom of a small insurance company as a junior accountant. The office I worked in was smaller than some people's closets, and my desk was a folding table that wobbled every time I typed. But I did not complain. I worked harder than anyone around me. I stayed late. I arrived early. I volunteered for projects no one else wanted. Year after year, I climbed the ladder one rung at a time. By the time I was 45, I had become the chief financial officer of one of the largest insurance companies in the Northeast. When I retired at 55, I had accumulated a net worth of over $3 million. Every cent of it earned through my own sweat and sacrifice. I met Martin at a financial conference in Boston when I was 26 years old. He was a software engineer with kind eyes and a gentle laugh that made me feel safe from the very first moment. Like me, Martin came from humble beginnings. His father was a factory worker, and his mother cleaned houses to help pay the bills. We understood each other in a way that did not require explanation. We got married after 2 years of dating in a small ceremony at a local church with only 30 guests. Our first home was a 1-bedroom apartment where the kitchen was so tiny we could not open the refrigerator and the oven at the same time. But we were happy. We were building something together brick by brick, dream by dream. Brooke came into our lives when I was 27. The moment the nurse placed her in my arms, I knew my entire purpose had shifted. This tiny, perfect human being was now the center of my universe. I made a silent promise to her that day. I swore she would never know the struggle I had known. She would never wonder if there was enough money for dinner. She would have every opportunity I had to fight to get. Balancing motherhood and a demanding career was the hardest thing I have ever done. There were nights when I would rock Brooke to sleep with one arm while typing financial reports with the other hand. I missed school plays and soccer games because of meetings I could not reschedule. The guilt ate at me constantly, but I told myself it was all for her. Everything I did was for her future. Martin was my partner in every sense of the word. He supported my career, picked up Brooke from school when I could not, and never once made me feel guilty for working. When he was diagnosed with lung cancer 8 years ago, our world shattered into a million pieces. He fought for 2 years, but the disease was stronger than any of us wanted to admit. Before he passed, Martin held my hand and made me promise something. He said that Brooke was a good girl, but she was growing up in comfort that we never had. He worried that she might forget where she came from, forget the value of gratitude and humility. He asked me to remind her to teach her, and if she ever lost her way, to have the courage to let her find it again on her own. I promised him I would. I just never imagined how hard that promise would be to keep. From the moment Brooke turned 18, I made sure she had everything she needed to succeed. I paid for her entire education at Boston University, a private school with tuition that cost more than my parents earned in 3 years, combined. When she graduated, I bought her first car, a reliable sedan that would get her safely to her new job in New York City. When she found an apartment in Manhattan, I paid the deposit and the first 6 months of rent. When Brooke met Derek and they decided to get married, I contributed $100,000 to the wedding. It was held at a beautiful venue in the Hamptons, with flowers imported from Holland and a 7-tier cake that cost more than my first car. I did not complain about a single expense. This was my only daughter, and I wanted her day to be perfect. But my support did not stop at the wedding. I set up a trust fund for Brooke, a gift of $700,000 that I planned to transfer to her completely when she turned 35. Until then, I remained the trustee, but I deposited $15,000 every month into a joint bank account that Brooke could access freely. I also co-signed on her Manhattan apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom unit worth $500,000. My name was on the deed alongside hers and Derek's. I gave everything I had because I loved her. I never once considered that I might need to take it back. I never imagined that my generosity would be mistaken for weakness, or that my love would be repaid with humiliation. But looking back now, the signs were there. I just refused to see them. The changes in Brooke did not happen overnight. They crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a foundation. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that marriage changes people, that she was just adjusting to her new life. But deep down, I knew something was shifting, and it was not shifting in a good direction. Derek came from old money. His family had been wealthy for generations, the kind of wealth that came with summer homes in the Hamptons and memberships to exclusive country clubs. His father managed a hedge fund that handled portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His mother had been a model in her youth and now spent her days chairing charity galas and judging everyone who did not meet her standards. From the beginning, I sensed that Derek's family looked down on me. They were polite enough at family gatherings, but there was always a coldness behind their smiles. They asked questions that felt more like interrogations. What neighborhood did I grow up in? What did my parents do for a living? Had I ever traveled to Europe before I started making real money? I answered honestly, never ashamed of my roots. But I noticed that Derek's mother would exchange glances with her husband whenever I mentioned Newark or my father's plumbing business, as if my past was something embarrassing, something to be tolerated rather than respected. What hurt more than their judgment was watching Brooke absorb it. Slowly, my daughter began to change. She started talking about old money and new money as if there was some fundamental difference in the value of the people who had each. She began correcting my grammar, something she had never done before. She suggested I might want to update my wardrobe, implying that my classic practical style was somehow outdated. One evening at dinner, Derek made a comment that I will never forget. We were sitting in Brooke's apartment, and he looked around and said that it was a nice place, considering where Naomi came from. Then he laughed as if he had made a clever joke. I waited for Brooke to defend me. I waited for her to tell him that was inappropriate. Instead, she laughed along with him and quickly changed the subject. That was the first crack. But I sealed it over with excuses. He was just joking. He did not mean it that way. Brooke was probably just nervous. My 58th birthday should have been a celebration. I invited Brooke and Derek to my home for a simple dinner. Nothing extravagant, just a home-cooked meal and time together as a family. I spent the entire day making my mother's famous roast beef recipe, the same one she used to make for special occasions when I was a child. Brooke and Derek arrived 45 minutes late. There was no apology, no explanation, just a casual comment from Brooke that traffic had been terrible. Derek walked in, looked at the dining table I had set with care, and said it looked quaint. He used that word like it was an insult wrapped in a compliment. Throughout dinner, they talked almost exclusively about an upcoming trip to the Maldives with Derek's parents. They showed me pictures of the resort, the private villas over the water, the spa treatments they had booked. When I tried to ask Brooke about her work, she gave me one-word answers before steering the conversation back to their vacation plans. They stayed for less than 90 minutes. Derek mentioned they had an early morning the next day, and Brooke did not argue. They left before I could even cut the birthday cake I had ordered from the bakery down the street. I sat alone at my dining table looking at the untouched cake with its 58 candles still in the box. That night, I washed the dishes by myself and wondered when my daughter had become a stranger. 2 weeks after my birthday, I received a phone call from the bank that manages the joint account I share with Brooke. The account manager said there had been unusually large withdrawals recently and wanted to verify that I was aware of them. My heart began to race as I asked for details. Over the past month, more than $50,000 had been withdrawn from the account. When I asked what the money had been used for, the account manager listed the transactions: designer handbags, a luxury watch, a deposit on a new sports car. Not for Brooke, for Derek. I sat in stunned silence. I had been depositing money into that account to help Brooke build her future, to give her security. Instead, she was using it to buy expensive toys for her husband without even asking me, without even mentioning it. That evening, I called Brooke to discuss the withdrawals. I tried to keep my voice calm to approach the conversation without accusation. I simply said I had noticed some large purchases and wanted to understand what was happening. Brooke's response shocked me. Her voice turned defensive, almost hostile. She said I had told her that account was for her. She asked if I was trying to control how she spent her money. She said Derek thought I was being too controlling, that I needed to let her live her own life. I tried to explain that it was a joint account, that I had a right to know how the money I contributed was being used. But Brooke cut me off. She said she was an adult now and did not need her mother monitoring her finances. Then she hung up without saying goodbye. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after the call ended. The silence in my house felt heavier than it ever had before. I thought about Martin's words before he died, about his fear that Brooke might forget where she came from. I had dismissed his concerns, then certain that our daughter would always remember the values we had taught her. Now I was not so sure. 2 weeks passed after our argument about the bank account. The silence between Brooke and me was thick and uncomfortable, filled with unspoken words and avoided phone calls. I had almost resigned myself to waiting for her to come around when my phone rang one Tuesday afternoon. It was Brooke, and her voice was completely different from our last conversation. She sounded warm, almost excited, as if our argument had never happened. She told me her company was hosting their annual holiday party at a 5-star hotel in Manhattan, and she wanted me to come. I was caught off guard by the invitation. Brooke explained that this was a major event for her career. Important clients would be there, along with senior executives and potential investors. She said she wanted to introduce me to her colleagues to show them where she came from. My heart lifted at those words. Perhaps I had been too harsh in my judgment. Perhaps Brooke was trying to bridge the gap between us, to acknowledge me publicly in front of the people who mattered to her professionally. I accepted the invitation, immediately grateful for this olive branch. Brooke added one more thing before hanging up. She said I should dress nicely because this was an upscale event. The comment stung a little, but I pushed the feeling aside. She was just being practical, I told myself. She wanted me to feel comfortable among her corporate peers. I threw myself into preparing for the party with an enthusiasm I had not felt in months. I went to Nordstrom and spent hours finding the perfect dress, an elegant black gown that was sophisticated without being flashy. I visited the salon and had my hair styled in a way that made me feel 10 years younger. I even treated myself to a professional manicure, something I rarely did. The night before the party, I called my sister Patricia in Boston to tell her about the invitation. She was happy for me but cautious. She reminded me to keep my expectations realistic, to not read too much into a single gesture. I told her she was being overprotective. This was my daughter reaching out. I needed to believe in that. I also decided to bring 2 gifts to the party. The first was a bouquet of flowers to congratulate Brooke on her professional success. The second was far more meaningful. It was my mother's pearl necklace, the one she had saved for an entire year to buy as my graduation present. That necklace represented everything my family valued: hard work, sacrifice, and love. I wanted to pass it down to Brooke to remind her of the women who came before her. I wrapped the necklace in a small velvet box and tucked it into my purse. I imagined the moment I would give it to her, imagined her eyes filling with tears as she understood its significance. I was so caught up in that fantasy that I never considered it might go differently. The night of the party, I arrived at the hotel exactly on time. The venue was breathtaking, a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Servers in crisp uniforms moved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne. Everything sparkled with money and importance. I looked for Brooke near the entrance where we had agreed to meet, but she was not there. I waited for 10 minutes, then 15. Finally, I called her phone. She answered with noise in the background, voices and laughter competing for attention. She said she was tied up with clients and told me to just come in and find her. I walked into the ballroom alone, scanning the crowd of unfamiliar faces. There must have been 300 people there, all dressed in designer clothes and speaking in confident tones about deals and investments. I felt suddenly small despite my careful preparations. When I finally spotted Brooke, she was standing near the center of the room with a group of well-dressed professionals. Derek was beside her, his hand resting possessively on her back. I made my way toward them, rehearsing what I would say, how I would introduce myself. But when I reached the group, Brooke barely glanced at me. She was in the middle of a conversation and did not pause to acknowledge my arrival. I stood there awkwardly for several minutes, waiting for a break in the discussion, waiting for my daughter to introduce me. When she finally turned, she said simply that this was Naomi. No mention of the word mother. No explanation of who I was. Just my name. As if I were an acquaintance she barely knew. One of the men in the group asked how I knew Brooke. Before I could answer, Brooke said that I was family and quickly redirected the conversation to a business matter. The word family hung in the air, deliberately vague, carefully distanced from the truth. I stood there, holding my bouquet of flowers, the velvet box weighing heavy in my purse, and felt something inside me begin to crack. The first hour of the party felt like walking through a fog. I kept telling myself that Brooke was under pressure, that she was focused on impressing her colleagues and clients. I found a quiet spot near one of the buffet tables and tried to blend into the background, watching my daughter work the room with practiced ease. At some point, an older gentleman approached me. He was holding an empty champagne glass and seemed slightly confused. He asked if I could get him another drink, gesturing toward a passing server. Before I could explain that I was a guest, not staff, Brooke appeared beside us. She looked at the man, then at me, and then she said something that stopped my heart. She told him that I could help him and that I was good at that sort of thing. Then she smiled and walked away without a backward glance. I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. My own daughter had just implied to a stranger that I was hired help. The man looked at me expectantly, holding out his empty glass. In my shock, I actually took it from him, my hands moving automatically while my mind screamed in protest. Derek walked past at that moment. He saw me standing there with the empty glass, and a smirk crossed his face. He did not say anything, but his expression said everything. He was amused. He was enjoying this. I set the glass down on a nearby table and pressed my hands together to stop them from shaking. This could not be happening. There had to be some misunderstanding. I needed to talk to Brooke, needed to understand what was going on. I found her near the bar, speaking with two women who appeared to be her superiors. I touched her elbow gently and asked if we could speak privately for a moment. Brooke's expression flickered with irritation before she excused herself from the conversation. We stepped to a quieter corner, and I asked her directly what was happening. Why had she not introduced me as her mother? Why had she let that man think I was a server? Brooke sighed as if I were a child who could not understand simple concepts. She said I was embarrassing her in front of important people. She said these people came from a certain world, a world where background mattered, where pedigree mattered. They did not need to know the details of her personal life. I felt my throat tighten. I asked her directly if she was ashamed of me. She did not answer the question. Instead, she said, I could stay at the party if I wanted, but I should try not to stand out. I should just be a regular guest and let her focus on her career. Then she walked back to her colleagues without another word. I watched her go, feeling as though I had been slapped across the face. But the worst was yet to come. Halfway through the evening, the company's CEO took the stage to recognize outstanding employees. Brooke's name was called, and she walked up to the microphone to thunderous applause. She stood there in her designer dress, looking every bit the successful executive she had become, and began to thank the people who had supported her journey. She thanked her amazing husband Derek for his constant encouragement. She thanked her wonderful in-laws for welcoming her into their family. She thanked her mentors at the company for believing in her potential. She did not mention me. Not once. Not a single word about the mother who had paid for her education, not a syllable about the woman who had worked double shifts to give her every opportunity. I stood in that crowd of 300 strangers and listened to my daughter erase me from her story. After the speech, people crowded around Brooke to offer congratulations. I stayed where I was, unable to move, unable to breathe. A woman I did not recognize approached Brooke and asked about the older woman standing alone near the back of the room. She said she had noticed me watching Brooke throughout the evening. Brooke glanced in my direction. Then she said something that shattered whatever remained of my heart. She said I was just someone who helped around the house. She called me a family assistant. The words carried across the murmuring crowd. Several people heard. Several people laughed softly at what they assumed was a dismissive joke. My daughter had just called me the help in front of hundreds of people, and she did not even have the decency to look ashamed. I did not cry. I did not make a scene. I simply turned and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor with each step. The velvet box with my mother's pearls was still in my purse. The flowers I had brought lay abandoned on a table somewhere behind me. No one tried to stop me. No one asked if I was all right. I walked out of that hotel and into the cold December night, and I made a decision that would change everything. I do not remember driving home that night. The streets of Manhattan blurred past my window, the Christmas lights and festive decorations mocking me with their cheerfulness. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Connecticut, it was past midnight, and the house was dark and silent. I did not turn on any lights. I sat in my living room in complete darkness, still wearing my expensive dress and my carefully styled hair, and I let the full weight of what had happened settle over me. My daughter had publicly humiliated me. She had denied me in front of her colleagues, her boss, her husband. She had called me someone who helps around. I thought about my mother, who had scrubbed other people's floors so I could have textbooks. I thought about my father, whose hands were permanently calloused from decades of manual labor. I thought about Martin, who had loved me for exactly who I was, never once apologizing for our modest beginnings. And I thought about Brooke, the baby I had held in my arms 31 years ago, promising her the world. At 2 a.m, I called Patricia. She answered on the first ring as if she had been waiting for my call. I told her everything. The party, the humiliation, the speech where I was erased the moment Brooke called me the help. Patricia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, the silence stretched for a long moment. Then she reminded me of Martin's words. She said that Martin knew this might happen someday, that he saw something in Brooke that worried him. He told me that if she ever forgot who she was, I should have the courage to let her learn her own lessons. Patricia asked me if I was ready to do that. I closed my eyes and saw Martin's face in my memory. I heard his voice telling me that love sometimes means letting go. I remembered his fear that our comfortable life might soften. Brooke's character might make her forget the values we had worked so hard to instill. When I opened my eyes, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called my attorney, Mr. Hoffman, and requested an emergency meeting. I arrived at his office before 9, still wearing the determination I had found in the darkness of my living room. I sat across from his desk and laid out exactly what I wanted. First, I wanted to cancel the trust fund. The $700,000 I had set aside for Brooke was still under my control as trustee. It had never been formally transferred to her. I wanted it dissolved immediately and moved back into my personal accounts. Second, I wanted to remove my name from the joint bank account I shared with Brooke. More importantly, I wanted to withdraw every dollar I had contributed to that account. My records showed I had deposited $180,000 over the years. I wanted it all back. Third, I wanted to begin the process of selling my share of the Manhattan apartment. My name was on the deed as a co-owner. I had every legal right to demand that the property be sold or that Brooke and Derek buy out my portion. Mr. Hoffman reviewed my requests carefully. He confirmed that everything I wanted was completely legal. The trust fund had clear terms stating that I retained full control until Brooke turned 35. The joint account was subject to standard banking laws, and I could withdraw my contributions at any time. The apartment would require more paperwork, but my rights as co-owner were indisputable. I signed every document he placed in front of me. My hand did not shake. My voice did not waver. For the first time in months, I felt completely certain of my actions. Within 24 hours, the changes were complete. The $700,000 from the trust fund was transferred to my personal account. $180,000 was withdrawn from the joint account, leaving only the money Brooke had deposited herself. A formal notice was sent to Brooke and Derek regarding my intention to sell my share of their apartment. I also canceled the supplementary credit card I had given Brooke years ago, the one she used for emergencies that had somehow become everyday expenses. Every financial tie I had created out of love was now severed. I sent Brooke a single email that evening. It was brief and factual. I told her I had made some changes to our financial arrangements and that we should talk when she was ready. I did not explain. I did not apologize. I did not beg. Then I turned off my phone and sat in Martin's old armchair by the window. The sky outside was clear, and I could see stars for the first time in what felt like years. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel vindictive. I felt something I had not experienced in a very long time. I felt free. The fallout came faster than I expected. I woke the next morning to 17 missed calls from Brooke and twice as many text messages. They started with confusion and escalated quickly to panic, then anger. She had checked her bank account that morning and found a balance of less than $200. All the money I had deposited over the years was gone. Her messages told the story of her unraveling. The first asked what happened to the account. Was it some kind of bank error? The second demanded to know if I had done something. The third accused me of stealing from her. The fourth threatened legal action. By the 10th message, she was calling me selfish and vindictive and cruel. I read each message without responding. I let her words wash over me like waves against a cliff. They hurt, but they did not move me. I had spent too many years being moved by her expectations. Now I was standing firm. Derek's name appeared on my phone around noon. His voice was sharp and aggressive when I finally answered. He demanded to know what I thought I was doing. He said I had no right to take money from my own daughter. He threatened to contact his father's lawyers, promised they would make me regret this decision. I listened to him rant for nearly 5 minutes without saying a word. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke calmly. I told him that every dollar I withdrew was money I had deposited myself. I told him the trust fund had never been transferred to Brooke and remained my property. I told him that his father's lawyers were welcome to review the paperwork, but they would find everything in perfect legal order. Then I hung up while he was still sputtering. Late that afternoon, I heard a car pull into my driveway. From the window, I watched Brooke emerge from the passenger side, her face blotchy from crying. Derek got out of the driver's seat, his expression dark with barely contained rage. I opened the door before they could knock. Brooke pushed past me into the house, her voice shrill and accusing. She demanded to know why I was doing this to her. She said I was ruining her life over one misunderstanding, that I was being dramatic and petty. I invited them to sit down. Derek refused, choosing to stand by the door with his arms crossed. Brooke collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. I took the chair across from her and waited for her to calm down enough to listen. Then I began to explain. I told her about the trust fund, about the joint account, about my rights as co-owner of the apartment. I produced the documents Mr. Hoffman had prepared, showing exactly what had been done and why it was all legal. I watched Derek grab the papers and scan them, his face growing paler as he realized there was no legal loophole to exploit. But that was just the technicality. The real explanation came next. I looked directly at Brooke and asked if she remembered what happened at the party. I asked if she remembered not introducing me as her mother. I asked if she remembered telling that man I could help him with his drink. I asked if she remembered thanking everyone in her speech, except the woman who paid for her education, her first car, her apartment, her wedding. Brooke's face crumpled. She tried to explain that she had been stressed that the event was important for her career, that she had not meant anything by it. I held up my hand to stop her. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me since that night. I asked if she remembered what she said when her colleague asked who I was. Brooke went silent. Derek shifted uncomfortably by the door. I repeated her words back to her. Someone who helps around. A family assistant. I said those words into the quiet room and watched my daughter flinch as if I had struck her. I told her I had spent 31 years loving her. I had sacrificed promotions to attend her school events. I had sold my favorite car to pay for her college. I had worked late nights and early mornings to give her every advantage I never had. And in return, she had stood in a room full of strangers and called me the help. Brooke tried to apologize. She said she was sorry that she did not know what she had been thinking that Derek's family had gotten into her head. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I told her that I did not need her apology right now. What I needed was for her to understand that love does not mean tolerating disrespect. I told her she was welcome back in my life when she was ready to treat me as her mother, not as someone to be hidden away in corners and denied before crowds. Derek muttered something about this being ridiculous and stormed out to the car. Brooke lingered for a moment, her eyes searching my face for some sign of softening. She found none. When she left, she looked back once from the doorway. For just a moment, I saw something in her expression that reminded me of the little girl she used to be, scared and uncertain and desperately wanting her mother's approval. I closed the door gently and watched through the window as she walked to the car. Part of me wanted to run after her to take back everything and return to the comfortable pretense we had maintained for years. But I did not. Because Martin was right. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is let them face the consequences of their choices. The weeks following that confrontation were the hardest of my life. The silence from Brooke was deafening, a constant absence that filled every room of my house. I second-guessed my decision 1,000 times. I wondered if I had been too harsh, too unforgiving, too quick to punish. But then, I would remember her voice saying someone who helps around, and my resolve would harden again. I forced myself to focus on things I had neglected for years. I signed up for a painting class at the community center, something I had wanted to do since I was a young woman, but never had time for. The instructor was a retired art teacher named Helen, who reminded me of my mother, patient and encouraging, and completely unimpressed by money or status. Patricia drove up from Boston to spend a week with me. We had grown apart over the years, our relationship reduced to holiday cards and occasional phone calls. But now, in the wake of everything that had happened, we found our way back to each other. We stayed up late, talking about our childhood, our parents, the paths our lives had taken. She reminded me of who I was before I became a mother, before I became a widow, before I became someone's embarrassment. My friend Grace, who I had known since college, invited me to join her book club. It was a group of women my age, all of them accomplished in their own ways, all of them dealing with their own versions of family complications. I discovered I was not alone in feeling invisible to my children. I was not the only mother who had given everything and received indifference in return. The money from the canceled trust fund sat in my account, all $700,000 of it. For weeks, I did not touch it. I did not want to make any decisions out of anger or spite. But gradually an idea began to form. I contacted the financial aid office at the state university, where I had earned my accounting degree decades ago. I inquired about establishing a scholarship fund for students from working-class families. Students like I had been, who had the intelligence and drive to succeed, but lacked the resources to get started. The administrators were thrilled. They helped me create the Martin and Naomi Reynolds Scholarship Fund, named for my late husband and myself. The $700,000 would provide full tuition for deserving students for years to come. Young people who reminded me of the girl I used to be, the girl who studied by flashlight and worked double shifts and refused to let her circumstances define her future. When I signed the final paperwork for the scholarship, I felt Martin's presence beside me. I could almost hear him saying that he was proud of me, that this was exactly right. 2 months after the party, Brooke called. Her voice was different from before, quieter and less defensive. She asked if she could come see me. Just her. No Derek. I agreed. She arrived on a gray February afternoon, driving a modest rental car instead of the luxury SUV Derek had bought with my money. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater that reminded me of what she wore in college. We sat in my kitchen, the same room where she used to do her homework while I cooked dinner. I made tea and waited for her to speak. The story came out slowly, painfully. Without my financial support, the cracks in her marriage had become impossible to ignore. Derek, it turned out, was far more interested in the lifestyle my money provided than in Brooke herself. When the money disappeared, so did his patience. He became critical and cold, blaming her for the situation, pressuring her to beg me to restore the funds. For the first time, Brooke saw him clearly. She saw how he had manipulated her perception of me, how he had encouraged her to view my working-class background as something shameful. She saw how his family's snobbery had infected her own thinking, turning her into someone she no longer recognized. She told me she was filing for divorce. She said she was moving out of the Manhattan apartment and finding something smaller, something she could afford on her own salary. She said she did not expect me to give her money again. She did not deserve it. I listened to everything without interrupting. When she finished, I reached across the table and took her hand. I told her that I loved her. I had never stopped loving her, not for a single moment. But love was not the same as enabling. Love sometimes meant letting someone fall so they could learn to stand on their own. She asked if I could ever forgive her for what she said at the party. I told her that forgiveness was already there, but trust would take longer. Trust had to be rebuilt through actions, not words. Brooke nodded, tears running down her cheeks. For the first time in years, I saw my daughter. Not the polished corporate executive, not the society wife, but the real Brooke. The one who still existed underneath all the pretense. I did not offer to reinstate the trust fund. I did not offer to help with her divorce or her new apartment. But I told her my door was open. I told her she could call me whenever she needed to talk. I told her we could rebuild our relationship one conversation at a time. She stayed for 3 hours that day. Before she left, I gave her the velvet box I had been carrying since the night of the party. She opened it and found the pearl necklace my mother had saved a year to buy. I told her the story behind it, about my mother scrubbing floors to afford a gift for her daughter. I told her this necklace represented everything our family valued. Hard work, sacrifice, and unconditional love. I said I wanted her to have it not as a reward, but as a reminder of where she came from and who she was meant to be. Brooke held the pearls against her chest and cried harder than I had ever seen her cry. When she finally left, she hugged me at the door for a long time. Neither of us wanted to let go. A year has passed since that December night when I walked out of the party alone. The pain has faded into something softer, a scar that still aches sometimes, but no longer bleeds. Brooke's divorce was finalized in the fall. She moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn. Nothing like the luxury she had grown accustomed to, but hers. She calls me every Sunday evening now, and we talk about her work, her life, her plans for the future. She is rebuilding herself from the ground up, learning to live within her means, discovering strength she did not know she had. Last month she came home for my 59th birthday. She brought a homemade cake slightly lopsided, but made with her own hands. She wore my mother's pearls around her neck. We did not talk about the $700,000. We did not talk about the party or the things she had said. Some wounds do not need to be picked at. They just need time to heal. I do not know what the future holds for us. I cannot promise that everything will be perfect from now on. Brooke is still learning, still growing, still finding her way. But she is doing it honestly now. She is doing it with open eyes and a humble heart. And that is worth more than any amount of money I could have given her. If you are watching this and you find yourself in a similar situation, let me leave you with this. Love your children with everything you have. Give them every opportunity you can. But never, ever sacrifice your dignity for their approval. You deserve to be loved in return. You deserve to be respected. You deserve to be acknowledged as more than someone who helps around. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give is the gift of consequences. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let them fall and watch them rise again stronger and wiser than before. That is the lesson I learned. That is the lesson I hope Brooke will carry with her for the rest of her life. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your self-respect? Have you ever loved someone enough to let them face the consequences of their actions? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next story. And remember, no matter what you are going through, you are worthy of love and respect. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this community. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other. Until next time.